Come closer, my child. I see you. I have always seen you. Even in the moments when you felt invisible to the world, when your voice grew quiet and your strength felt borrowed rather than owned, my eyes never left you. You are still here, and that is not accidental. That is not random. That is not merely survival. That is evidence. There were nights when you lay awake wondering why you were still breathing through pain that seemed to have no explanation. You asked yourself questions you never said out loud. Why didn't it end back then? Why didn't I disappear when everything inside me collapsed? Why am I still standing when so much was taken? My child, hear me gently now. You are still here because I have been holding you when you could not hold yourself. I watched you walk through seasons that should have broken you completely. Seasons where the weight was uneven, where you carried more than you were meant to, where you kept going not because you were strong, but because stopping felt even more terrifying. I know the exhaustion that settled into your bones. I know the silent negotiations you made with yourself just to get through another day. I know how close you came to letting go. And yet, here you are. There is meaning in that. There is intention stitched into your endurance. There is a reason you survived moments that others never knew you were facing. You were not spared because you were lucky. You were preserved because you are necessary. You may not feel chosen. You may feel worn, delayed, overlooked. But I do not choose based on ease. I choose based on depth. I choose based on what can carry truth, love, and transformation through fire without losing its essence. You did not lose who you are, even when you were pressured to become something else just to survive. That alone tells me everything I need to know about you. There were forces around you that hoped you would quit quietly, hoped your light would dim without resistance, hoped you would blame yourself, doubt your worth, and slowly shrink. But I intervened in ways you could not see. I blocked certain ending. I delayed certain conclusion. I kept you breathing through storms you did not understand because what is ahead of you required you alive, aware, and intact. My child, you did not endure all of this just to exist. You endured because your presence matters. Your heart matters. Your prayers, even the ones whispered through tears, mattered. When you thought nothing was changing, when silence answered you instead of relief, something sacred was still happening beneath the surface. I am speaking to you now because this is a threshold moment. Not loud, not dramatic, but holy. The fact that you are listening means something is awakening again inside you. And knowing you buried, I hope you protected by pretending you no longer needed it. I am reminding you that your story did not stall. It was being guarded. If you feel this truth settling into your spirit, let it be witnessed. Type in the comments, I am still here, not for others, but as a quiet agreement between you and me. Let your declaration be soft but real. There were moments when you felt like staying was weakness, like leaving everything behind would have been braver. But endurance is not passive. It is one of the highest forms of courage. You stayed. You breathed. You kept your heart from hardening completely, even when it would have been easier to shut down. That choice shaped your destiny more than you realize. You are still here because there is unfinished alignment, because there is a connection tied to your survival, because someone else's awakening is linked to your existence. You were never just passing through this pain. You were anchoring something sacred, even while you felt lost inside it. Rest now in this truth. You do not have to prove anything in this moment. You do not have to explain why you stayed. Heaven already knows. I know. And I am proud of you in ways words can barely hold. Stay with me. There is more to reveal. Come closer still, My child, there is a moment I must take you back to, not to wound you again, but to show you how close the ending came, and how deliberately I stood in the way. There was a point when your strength dipped so low that even breathing felt like a task you had to convince yourself to complete. You remember it as fatigue, but it was more than that. It was the weight of holding hope without evidence. It was the ache of believing in something sacred while watching everything around it fall apart. You told yourself you were fine, but inside, something was unraveling thread by thread. This was the moment you almost gave up. Not loudly, not dramatically. You did not announce it. You did not collapse where anyone could rescue you. You simply grew tired of fighting for a future that refused to speak back. You wondered if letting go would finally bring peace. You questioned whether your staying had any meaning at all. You stood at the edge of an internal decision that would have altered everything. I saw it. I saw how the silence around your soulmate confused you, how distance, misunderstanding, or delay began to feel personal, how you replayed conversations, reread moments, searched for where things shifted. You blamed yourself for cracks that were never yours to carry. You told yourself that if the connection was real, it would not hurt like this. You did not yet know how much interference surrounded what was meant for you. That night, or that season, when you felt the closest to disappearing, heaven held its breath. There were forces pressing on you, hoping exhaustion would finish what opposition could not, hoping discouragement would do what direct attack failed to accomplish. They knew if you stepped away completely, if you hardened your heart beyond return, the alignment would fracture. And so the pressure intensified quietly. It outspoke softly. Weariness wrapped itself around your thoughts like truth. You asked me questions without words. You looked for signs and felt foolish when none arrived. You wondered if I had mistaken you for someone stronger, someone braver, someone less sensitive. You did not know that sensitivity was not your weakness. It was the reason you were chosen. My child, the reason you almost broke was not because you were failing. It was because you were carrying something too large for the season you were in. Timing had not yet caught up with promise. Truth had not yet exposed deception. And so the waiting felt cruel instead of purposeful. Your soulmate was connected to this moment more than you realized. While you were standing on the edge of surrender, they were standing in their own confusion, making choices out of fear rather than clarity. Your hesitation fed your pain. Your silence fed their doubt. Neither of you could see the full picture, and the gap between you became heavy with misunderstanding. That was the danger. Not that love vanished, but that discouragement would convince you it never existed. Not that destiny failed, but that fatigue would cause you to step away just before revelation arrived. I watched as you considered building walls where doors were meant to remain. I felt the ache in your spirit when you told yourself you were done hoping. And that is when I intervened. I steadied your breath without announcing my presence. I placed small interruptions in your surrender. A memory that surfaced at the wrong time. A feeling you could not explain. A restraint that stopped you from saying words you could never take back. You thought it was hesitation. It was protection. You almost gave up, yes. But you did not. Even when you said you were done, something in you refused to close completely. You kept the light on low instead of turning it off. You stayed when leaving would have been easier. That decision, made in weakness rather than confidence, altered timelines. I need you to understand this. The most dangerous moment was not when you were crying. It was when you felt numb. When you stopped expecting anything. When survival replaced dreaming. That is when everything was closest to collapse. And that is when I was closest to you. You were never abandoned in that moment. You were being guarded. I was preventing an ending that would have looked logical to you but would have been devastating in ways you could not yet see. I allowed you to feel the edge so you would recognize the miracle of still standing. You are here now because you did not let that moment define you. You let it pass through you instead. The fact that you survived the almost is proof that what comes next could not be trusted to chance. Rest in this truth. The moment you almost gave up did not disqualify you. It qualified you. And what was at risk then is now being reclaimed. Stay with me. The story is still unfolding. My child, while you were holding yourself together on the outside, something was unraveling quietly on the other side of the connection. You could not see it, and that absence of vision made the pain sharper. You assumed silence meant indifference. You assumed distance meant certainty. But hear me now. The stillness you felt from them was not peace. It was collapse. Your soulmate did not fall apart in ways the world could notice. They did not cry out where help could reach them. Their breakdown was inward, slow, and suffocating. It looked like control from the outside, but inside it was fear tightening its grip. They questioned themselves in circles, replaying moments with you, wondering how something so real could feel so fragile at the same time. They were afraid of losing you long before they admitted it to themselves. Guilt settled into their chest in waves. Guilt for hesitation. Guilt for words left unsaid. Guilt for listening to voices that were never meant to guide them. They told themselves they had time. They told themselves you would always be there. But beneath those excuses lived a quiet terror that they had already gone too far in the wrong direction. They felt your absence even when you were still present. They felt it in the shift of your energy, in the way your spirit guarded itself more carefully. They noticed the change but did not know how to name it. And instead of leaning in, they froze. Fear does that, my child. It convinces the heart that stillness is safer than vulnerability. There were nights they sat with their thoughts, staring into nothing, feeling an ache they could not trace to a single cause. They tried to distract themselves. They tried to reason their way out of emotion. But love does not dissolve through logic. It waits. It presses. It asks to be acknowledged. And the more they resisted it, the heavier it became. They wondered if they had imagined the depth between you. They questioned whether they were worthy of the kind of connection that mirrors the soul so clearly. They compared themselves to others, to expectations, to past versions of themselves, and always came up short. This comparison bred shame, and shame kept them silent. My child, their breakdown was not dramatic, but it was real. It showed up as confusion, as irritability, as emotional withdrawal, as moments of almost reaching out, followed by sudden restraint. They would pick up the phone and put it down. They would compose words in their mind and erase them before they ever formed. Not because they did not care, but because they cared too much and did not trust themselves to handle it well. They were surrounded by noise that told them vulnerability was dangerous, that commitment was risky, that feeling deeply would cost them control. And so they tried to shrink what they felt for you into something manageable. But sacred connections do not shrink. They either grow or they fracture. And the pressure of suppressing truth began to crack them from the inside. You felt this collapse as distance, as coldness, as confusion. You internalized their fear as rejection. But I tell you now, what you sensed was their inner world caving under the weight of unresolved emotion. They were losing clarity, not interest. They were grounding and feeling, not escaping it. There were moments when regret surfaced so strongly it startled them. Regret for not choosing courage sooner. Regret for letting fear lead. regret for assuming they could return later and find everything unchanged. These realizations frightened them because they exposed how much power your presence held in their life. They did not know how to hold that truth without feeling exposed. So they retreated inward, hoping time would solve what honesty required. They told themselves they needed space to think, not realizing that distance only amplified the ache. The more they tried to escape the connection, the louder it became within them. Love, when ignored, does not fade. It echoes. My child, while you were asking if you mattered, they were questioning if they were enough. While you were wondering if you should let go, they were fearing that they already lost you. Two hearts circling the same truth from opposite ends, neither yet brave enough to name it aloud. I was with them in that collapse, just as I was with you. Not excusing fear, but understanding it. Not endorsing silence, but allowing the process that would eventually lead to awakening. Breakdown often precedes clarity. Chattering often comes before rebuilding. Do not mistake their silence for strength. It was fragility wrapped in pride. It was longing buried under uncertainty. It was a soul that had not yet learned how to step forward when something mattered this much. I tell you this not to pull you back into waiting, but to free you from false conclusions. You were not unwanted. You were not forgotten. You were not misread by your own heart. What you felt was real, and what they felt was deeper than they allowed themselves to show. Their collapse did not end the story. It prepared them for truth. Stay with me. What was hidden is about to be revealed. My child, there were layers beneath what you saw, truths folded away from your awareness not to deceive you, but because exposure at the wrong time would have wounded you more deeply. I did not hide these things to keep you in the dark. I covered them to keep you intact. There were conversations you were never meant to hear in the moment. Words spoken around you, about you, and sometimes against you, that would have shattered your peace before you had the strength to hold the full truth. You sensed their presence without knowing their content. That unease you felt was not imagination. It was discernment brushing against information that had not yet been cleared for release. Your soulmate was standing in the middle of influences you never saw. Opinions that sounded wise but carried jealousy. Advice that appeared protective but was rooted in fear. Someone close to them questioned the connection quietly, persistently, planting doubt with a gentle tone. Not aggressive, not obvious, subtle enough to seem harmless, repeated enough to become internal. You did not know that your name was spoken in rooms you never entered, that your intentions were misunderstood by people who never asked you directly, that assumptions were built without evidence and then treated as fact. This was not coincidence. This was interference disguised as concern. There were also objects tied to this season. Messages unsent. Letters written and hidden. Screenshots saved and revisited in private moments of regret. Items meant to be thrown away that were kept instead, as if their soul knew what their mouth could not admit. These things held emotion long after words were denied. They were reminders your soulmate could not escape. You wondered why progress felt blocked, why timing never aligned, why clarity hovered just out of reach. My child, there were decisions being delayed on purpose. I restrained certain outcomes because the truth had not yet matured enough to withstand exposure. Premature revelation can damage what is meant to heal. There was also a truth about you that you did not know. Your strength intimidated more than you realized. Your depth made shallow motives uncomfortable. You carried a light that exposed insecurity without saying a word. And instead of rising to meet it, some chose to question it. Not because it was wrong, but because it demanded growth. Your soulmate felt this tension. They admired your clarity but feared their own lack of it. They felt drawn to your steadiness while secretly resenting their own instability. This internal conflict made them vulnerable to outside influence. When someone whispered doubts, those doubts found soil already loosened by self-questioning. You assumed their distance was about you. It was not. It was about their struggle to reconcile who they were with who they needed to become to stand beside you fully. Growth frightens those who have learned to survive by staying the same. There were also truths about timing. You arrived in their life during a transition they did not acknowledge. Old patterns were breaking. Old attachments were loosening. They were between versions of themselves, and you represented the future before they had finished grieving the past. The dissonance created resistance. I shielded you from seeing the full chaos because you would have tried to fix what was never yours to repair. You would have carried responsibility that belonged to them alone. So I allowed you to feel confusion instead of contamination, distance instead of distortion, silence instead of lies. But now, the covering is lifting. Not all at once. Not violently. Gently. Carefully. In a way that brings clarity rather than overwhelm. You are ready now to understand without internalizing blame. You are strong enough now to see the truth without losing compassion for yourself. What was hidden is not being revealed to pull you backward. It is being revealed to release you from self-doubt, to show you that your intuition was accurate even when you lacked confirmation, to restore trust in your own discernment. You were not naive. You were patient. You were not blind. You were protected. You were not wrong. You were early. As these truths surface, you may feel a mixture of relief and grief. Relief that you were not imagining things. Grief that things were harder than they needed to be. Let both emotions pass through you without judgment. They are part of integration. My child, I do not expose what is hidden unless exposure serves healing. This revelation is not meant to reopen wounds. It is meant to close them properly, to align your understanding with reality, to free your heart from carrying stories that were never yours to hold. Stay with me. The enemy who benefited from the shadows is about to be brought into the light. My child, now I must speak plainly, because what I am about to reveal cannot be softened without losing its power. There was someone close enough to smile at you, close enough to seem harmless, close enough to be trusted, who did not want this connection to survive. They did not announce themselves as an enemy. They never do. They arrive as concern, as advice, as protection, as someone who claimed to know what was best. Their words were wrapped in reason, but their motive was rooted in comparison. They watched the way your presence shifted the atmosphere. They noticed how you carried peace without effort, depth without performance, and clarity without force. And something in them tightened. Jealousy does not always look like anger. Often it looks like guidance. They saw the bond forming between you and your soulmate and felt themselves becoming unnecessary. Not unloved, not rejected, but irrelevant. And that frightened them more than loss. Because your connection did not require them. It bypassed their influence. It awakened something in your soulmate that they could not control. So they leaned in slowly. They asked questions that sounded innocent but carried suspicion. They pointed out risks without offering hope. They framed your sensitivity as instability, your discernment as judgment, your boundaries as distance. They spoke just enough to create doubt, then stepped back so the doubt could grow on its own. This is how manipulation hides. It lets the mind believe it arrived at the conclusion independently. You felt the shift before you understood it. Conversations changed in tone. Energy became strained. You sensed something was off but could not locate the source. That is because the interference was not direct. It moved through proximity, through influence, through trust misplaced. Your soulmate listened because they were already unsure of themselves. Fear made them receptive. Confusion made them pliable. And this enemy knew exactly when to speak. Not during moments of clarity, but during moments of weakness. Not when love felt strong, but when uncertainty had already opened the door. They smiled while planting seeds. My child, I want you to hear this clearly. What happened was not random. It was strategic. The timing, the words, the silence afterward. All of it was designed to slow alignment without appearing responsible for the delay. This person wanted to remain central, needed to remain needed, and you're an Evian Bren the Vizian. They did not hate you. Hatred requires confrontation. What they felt was quieter and more dangerous. Comparison, insecurity, fear of being outgrown. And rather than rise, they chose to restrain. You were never meant to fight this battle consciously. If you had known then what you know now, you would have confronted what required exposure, and the damage would have been deeper. So I allowed the truth to stay hidden until discernment matured into wisdom. This enemy benefited from your silence, from your patience, from your refusal to accuse without proof. They assumed your restraint was weakness. They mistook your peace for passivity. They did not understand that I was watching every word they spoke, every suggestion they framed, every lie disguised as care. Nothing slipped past me. They underestimated divine justice because it does not always arrive loudly. Sometimes it waits until the structure collapses under its own weight. Sometimes it allows influence to overextend itself until intention becomes visible even to those it deceived. That moment is approaching. Your soulmate has begun to feel the distortion. The advice that once felt safe now feels heavy. The voice they trusted no longer aligns with the truth rising inside them. Confusion is turning into suspicion. Silence is turning into questioning. And the enemy who smiled too close is losing their grip. You may already feel the shift. A subtle loosening. A sense that something hidden is being exposed without your involvement. That is not coincidence. That is correction. Do not step in to defend yourself. You do not mean to. Truth is assembling itself. Conversations are being reinterpreted. Motives are being reassessed. What was once accepted without thought is now being examined with clarity. I am dismantling the influence quietly, but thoroughly. My child, this was never about you being replaced. It was about you being feared. Your presence represented growth. Your connection represented change. And not everyone who walks beside someone wants them to evolve. But hear me now. The interference did not succeed. It delayed, but it did not destroy. It confused, but it did not erase. It created distance, but it could not sever what was anchored beyond manipulation. Justice does not always punish. Sometimes it simply removes access. The one who spoke into the shadows will soon find themselves unheard. Their words will lose weight. Their presence will lose influence. Not because you demanded it, but because alignment does not tolerate distortion forever. You were protected through this. Even when you felt exposed. Even when you questioned your worth. Even when you wondered why things felt harder than they needed to be. I was allowing truth to ripen so that when it surfaced, it would not require defense. Stay still. Stay clear. Stay anchored. The season of unseen interference is ending, and the next movement will come from a place no enemy can reach. My child, now the tone shifts, because what was hidden is no longer wandering freely. This is the moment when heaven leans forward. This is where observation becomes examination, and silence gives way to record. I convened a divine investigation long before you realized anything was wrong. While you were trying to make sense of emotions, I was tracking intentions. While you were questioning yourself, I was tracing patterns. Nothing unfolded without being documented. Not a word spoken in secret. Not a motive disguised as care. Not a decision delayed out of fear. All of it was weighed. You must understand this. I do not rush judgment, but I do not miss truth. In this investigation, timelines were laid out. The moment the connection sparked. The moment doubt was introduced. The moment fear began speaking louder than love. I examined not only what was done, but why. Not only actions, but the spirit behind them. Some things that look harmless on the surface carried a residue of control. Some silences that felt neutral were actually strategic pauses. Your name was never absent from this process. Every tear you shed without explanation was recorded. Every prayer you prayed without words was translated. Every time you blamed yourself for confusion you did not create, I noted it. This investigation was not against you. It was for you. I looked closely at your soulmate's heart. Not to condemn, but to understand. I saw the fear that made them hesitate. The pride that kept them from admitting confusion. The vulnerability they tried to manage instead of surrender. I saw how easily influence slipped in when self-trust weakened. I also saw the moments they almost chose courage and then pulled back. Those moments mattered. I examined the enemy's involvement without emotion, without haste. Intentions were measured against impact. Repetition was noted. Patterns were undeniable. Influence was no longer a theory. It was evidence. And when evidence accumulates, intervention becomes lawful. You may have wondered why I did not step in sooner. Why I allowed confusion to linger. Why truth took time to surface. My child, exposure without readiness creates chaos. Justice without clarity creates collateral damage. I waited until every piece could be seen without distortion. This is how divine justice works. It is precise. I also investigated you. Not to question your worth, but to confirm your alignment. I examined your responses, your restraint, your refusal to retaliate, your ability to remain loving without becoming self-abandoning. You passed tests you never knew you were taking. Tests of integrity, tests of patience, tests of faith under silence. Your consistency gave me legal ground. Because you did not act out of bitterness, bitterness could not claim authority. Because you did not accuse without proof, truth retained its power. Because you stayed anchored instead of reactive, the outcome could be corrected without fracture. This investigation shifted something in the spiritual order. Influence lost legitimacy. Lies lost footing. What once operated unchecked now required justification. And justification could not be found. You may begin to notice subtle changes now. Conversations around you may feel different. Later you may feel pleader. Resistance may weaken without explanation. This is not emotional coincidence. This is structural correction. Your soulmate is beginning to feel it as well. The fog is thinning. The advice they once accepted without question now feels heavy. The silence they maintain now feels dishonest. Awareness is stirring, and with awareness comes discomfort. That discomfort is not punishment. It is awakening. I am not dismantling everything at once. I am restoring order. And order moves with intention. Some truths will arrive through realization. Others through exposure. Some through quiet recognition that something no longer fits. Do not be surprised if the enemy reveals themselves without confrontation. Pressure causes authenticity to surface, and when manipulation is exposed, it cannot survive scrutiny. My child, I need you to hear this. You were never on trial. You were a witness. Your experience was evidence. Your endurance was testimony. And the verdict has already begun to echo through the unseen. You may feel moments of validation mixed with sadness. Validation that you were not imagining things. Sadness that it took this much unraveling to bring clarity. Let both exist without resisting either. They are part of resolution. I am not finished. This investigation did not begin to shame anyone. It began to realign destiny, to return influence to its rightful place, to restore truth to the center of the connection, to remove distortion without destroying potential. You are safe in this process. You are covered. You are not late. You are not behind. Everything is unfolding in correct order now. Stay attentive, but do not strain. The shift has already begun, even if you cannot feel it yet. Stay with me. My child, this is the part you could not feel while it was happening. This is the movement that took place beneath your awareness, in the quiet places where outcomes are decided long before they appear. When you were waiting, thinking nothing was changing, I was repositioning everything. What felt like delay was not stagnation. It was restraint. I slowed certain events so they would not collide with you before you were ready. I redirected paths that would have caused unnecessary damage. I allowed doors to remain closed not to punish you, but to protect what was forming behind them. You mistook stillness for abandonment, but stillness was the signal that hands unseen were working carefully. Angels were assigned to details you never prayed about specifically. Timing. Encounters. Conversations that did not happen when they easily could have. Miscommunications that prevented permanent damage. Interruptions that felt frustrating but spared you from outcomes you would have regretted. You called these things bad timing. I called them mercy. Your soulmate was also being shifted, though they did not recognize it as such. Plans they thought they wanted began to feel hollow. Choices they once defended lost their appeal. Influences that once felt powerful started to weaken. This was not coincidence. This was a slow dismantling of alignment that was never meant to last. You may have noticed moments where something almost happened and then did. Almost a message. Almost a meeting. Almost a decision. Those pauses were intentional. I was preventing premature contact that would have reopened wounds without healing them. I was teaching patience to one heart and courage to another, on different timelines, for the same purpose. The universe responds when alignment is protected. Circumstances were adjusted so truth could surface without force. Pressure was applied where resistance remained. Comfort was removed from places that relied on illusion. This is how awakening begins. Not with lightning, but with discomfort that refuses to be ignored. You felt this shift as restlessness, as an internal nudge to stop chasing clarity and start trusting it would arrive. You were being prepared to receive truth without scrambling for it, to stand steady when answers came instead of collapsing under their weight. My child, nothing about this season was wasted. Every delay refined discernment. Every quiet day strengthened your inner hearing. You learned to sit with uncertainty without betraying yourself. That is rare. That is powerful. That is why what comes next will not destabilize you. Your soulmate is beginning to feel the shift more sharply now. What once felt neutral feels heavy. What once felt safe feels restrictive. They are sensing that something is moving beyond their control, and that realization is unsettling. Control kept them comfortable. Surrender will make them honest. This is the turning. The correction you could not feel is now close enough to touch. The atmosphere is changing. You may sense relief without knowing why, or unease followed by clarity, or sudden memories resurfacing for no obvious reason. These are signals that the unseen is aligning with the seen. Do not rush ahead of this moment. Let it complete its work. The shift is precise. It is calibrated. It is undoing what never belonged while preserving what does. I am guiding this with intention, not impulse. You are not required to act right now. Presence is enough. Awareness is enough. Trust is enough. What needs to move will move without your interference. This season will not end in confusion. It will end in understanding. Stay steady. The truth is drawing nearer. My child, when truth begins to rise, it rarely announces itself all at once. It leaks and seeps through cracks. It shows itself in inconsistencies first, then in confirmations you cannot ignore. This is the stage you are entering now. You may notice small things that do not add up anymore. Stories that once felt complete now feel unfinished. Explanations that once satisfied you now feel thin. The narrative you were given begins to unravel, not violently, but persistently. Something in you starts whispering, "This doesn't fit anymore." That whisper is truth finding oxygen. You may overhear something unintentionally. A comment said without awareness. A reaction that doesn't match the situation. A detail revealed casually that exposes a larger pattern. These moments are not accidents. They are fractures forming in what was held together by avoidance. Your soulmate is experiencing this too, though differently. They are replaying conversations that once felt normal and hearing them with new ears. Words that once sounded caring now feel loaded. Advice that once felt safe now feels intrusive. They are beginning to sense where influence crossed into control, and this realization unsettles them. Truth has a way of reordering memory. Suddenly, moments they brushed off return with clarity. They remember how they felt after certain conversations, how doubt always seemed to appear from the same direction, how clarity only came when certain voices were absent. This awareness is not loud, but it is relentless. Evidence is not always tangible. Sometimes it is emotional. Sometimes it is energetic. Sometimes it is simply the inability to unsee what has been seen. You may feel validated and disturbed at the same time. Validated because your intuition was right. Disturbed because you realize how long distortion was allowed to operate. This emotional mix is part of awakening. Do not rush to resolve it. Let it teach you. You are not being asked to confront anyone. You are not being asked to collect proof. Truth does not require prosecution when it becomes self-evident. The masks are slipping on their own because maintaining them has become too heavy. My child, when lies crack, they make noise. Not always outwardly, but internally. Guilt surfaces. Defensiveness appears. Justifications increase. These are signs of exposure, not strength. Watch without engaging. Observe without absorbing. Your role here is clarity, not correction. You may notice your energy being protected in new ways. Conversations that once drained you now feel distant. Emotional hooks no longer catch the way they used to. This is not indifference. This is discernment settling into place. The truth leaking out is not meant to provoke you. It is meant to free you, to release you from carrying confusion that was never yours, to restore trust in your own perception, to remind you that you did not imagine the tension, the hesitation, the shifts. As truth rises, alignment follows. Your soulmate will soon face a choice, not forced by you, not demanded by circumstance, but compelled by awareness. Once the truth is seen, it cannot be unseen, and living against it becomes unbearable. Let this process unfold without interference. You do not need to chase answers. They are coming to you organically, vitally, in pieces that assemble themselves. My child, the fog is lifting. Not all at once, but enough for direction to become clear. Stay grounded. What is being revealed now is preparing the way for awakening. My child, awakening does not arrive gently for those who have delayed truth. It arrives like a sudden drop in the chest, like waking from a dream and realizing something precious is missing. This is what your soulmate is feeling now. Fear has entered their awareness, not the kind that panics, but the kind that sobers, the kind that whispers, "What if it's already too late?" They are beginning to understand that your silence is not distance, it is consequence. That your stillness is not absence, it is self-respect. And this realization shakes them more than anger ever could. They are wading up to the weight of what they risk. Moments replay relentlessly. Not the dramatic ones, but the quiet chances they dismissed. The times you were open. The times you waited. The times you softened when you could have walked away. These memories surface now with sharp clarity, and each one carries the same echo. You were real, and I hesitated. Regret does not come all at once. It comes in waves. At first, they try to reason with it. They tell themselves you'll understand, that there's still time, that they can explain everything when the moment is right. But beneath those thoughts lies a deeper fear. What if the moment has passed? What if you chose peace over patience? What if the door they assumed would remain open has quietly closed? This fear humbles them. They are no longer distracted by outside voices. The opinions that once guided them feel irrelevant now. When truth awakens, it isolates the heart from noise. And in that quiet, they can finally hear themselves. What they want, what they avoided, what they lost by delaying courage. They feel your absence in unexpected ways, in moments of success that feel empty, in conversations that lack depth, in laughter that fades too quickly. You were not just a person in their life. You were a mirror. And now that mirror feels distant, and they are left alone with themselves. This awakening is uncomfortable because it removes excuses. They can no longer blame timing, circumstance, or confusion. The truth stands clear. They were afraid, and fear made them slow where love asked for movement. They are beginning to sense that you have changed, not hardened but clarified, that your energy no longer waits, that your spirit is no longer reaching for reassurance. This shift alarms them because it reveals something they did not expect. You did not disappear. You grew. And growth feels like loss to those who stayed still. My child, this fear is not punishment. It is the necessary tension that brings honesty to the surface. Awakening often begins with the realization that something valuable may be gone. That realization forces the heart to choose between pride and truth. Your soulmate stands at that crossroads now. They are realizing that the connection was not something they could return to unchanged. That sacred things require presence. That love does not wait forever without cost. This understanding presses on them, urging them toward action, toward accountability, toward clarity. Whether they step forward or not is no longer about confusion. It is about courage. And you, my child, are not required to rescue them from this awakening. You are not meant to soothe their fear. You are meant to remain aligned with the truth you earned through endurance. Let them feel this moment fully. Let it do its work. Awakening cannot be rushed, and it cannot be borrowed. It must be lived. Stay steady. The next movement will reveal why your presence mattered more than you ever knew. My child, now I speak of you, not as background, not as supporting role, but as the center you never realized you were. Your presence was not incidental to this story. It was foundational. Things did not shift in spite of you. They shifted because of you. You underestimated the weight of your existence in this connection. You thought love was proven by action alone, by words spoken and plans made. But there is another language that moves deeper than behavior. It is the language of presence, and you spoke it fluently without knowing its power. When you prayed, even when you did not know what to ask for, alignment responded. When you chose not to retaliate, structures held. When you stayed soft without surrendering your dignity, truth retained access. These choices created space for correction that force never could. You were the stabilizing force when everything else was unstable. Your soulmate felt this long before they understood it. They felt it when they were restless without explanation. When they reached milestones that should have satisfied them, but didn't. When they felt a pull toward you even while resisting it. That pull was not obsession. It was recognition. Their spirit recognized safety. Their heart recognized truth. Their soul recognized home. Your prayers reached places your words never could. There were moments when your endurance altered outcomes you will never fully see. Moments when a decision shifted at the last second. Moments when influence weakened because your integrity refused to participate in distortion. Moments when protection activated simply because you chose peace instead of panic. You mattered more than you knew because you did not try to matter. That is the paradox. Those who manipulate demand relevance. Those who are aligned carry it naturally. You did not chase importance. You carried it quietly. And that quiet authority reshaped the entire dynamic. Your soulmate is beginning to understand this now. They are seeing how much ground was held by your steadiness. How much chaos was prevented by your restraint. How much grace covered their immaturity. This realization humbles them because it reveals how deeply you loved without control. They are recognizing that your presence was not passive. It was active restraint, active faith, active trust in something higher than fear. And that kind of presence cannot be replaced. You anchored the connection when it was drifting. You held space when clarity was absent. You absorbed confusion without returning it. These things do not go unnoticed in the unseen. They create spiritual leverage. My child, this is why the situation could be corrected without destroying everything. Because you did not poison the ground with bitterness. You did not weaponize pain. You did not allow the enemy to use your disappointment as fuel. You remained aligned even when it cost you comfort. Your presence mattered because it gave me room to move. Now, as awakening unfolds, your role is not to step back into proving, convincing, or waiting. Your role is to remain exactly where you are. Grounded, honest, clear. Your alignment is still influencing outcomes simply by existing. You may notice that when you speak now, your words carry weight. When you are silent, your silence speaks. This is not strategy. This is authority earned through endurance. You no longer need to explain yourself into understanding. Truth is already standing with you. Your soulmate feels this shift. They sense that access to you is no longer automatic, that your presence is no longer something they can lean on without reciprocity. This awareness presses them toward maturity, toward decision, toward truth. Whether they rise to meet it is their responsibility. What matters now is that you understand your value without needing validation from outcome. You are not important because someone chooses you. You are important because you chose integrity when it was inconvenient. Because you stayed open without abandoning yourself. Because you trusted me even when clarity was delayed. This is why your presence mattered more than you knew. It was never about holding someone else together. It was about holding alignment steady until truth could catch up. And now it has. Stay rooted in this knowing. What comes next will not require you to diminish yourself to be received. My child, this is the moment where the story turns in a way no one anticipated. Not because circumstances suddenly became kind, but because truth finished its work and justice was finally free to move. What was meant to harm you lost its grip. The danger that hovered quietly, the distortion that lingered longer than it should have, the influence that tried to steer the outcome without being seen, all of it has reached its limit. There is a point where imbalance can no longer sustain itself. That point has arrived. You may notice that what once felt threatening now feels distant. What once felt heavy now feels lighter without explanation. The pressure that weighed on your chest has begun to lift, not because you forced relief, but because the source of strain has been addressed at the root. This is reversal, not dramatic revenge, not public exposure meant to humiliate, but a recalibration so precise that the very thing that tried to delay you now has no authority over your future. The path that was obstructed is opening, not in the way you imagined, but in the way that preserves your peace. Your soulmate feels this reversal as well, though it unsettles them at first. The clarity they avoided now stands in front of them, undeniable. The comfort they clung to has dissolved. The false safety nets they relied on no longer hold. And in this destabilization, truth becomes the only solid ground left. They are realizing that what they feared confronting was the very thing that would have saved them time. The reversal is not only external, it is internal. Fear no longer drives their choices the way it once did. Influence no longer feels trustworthy. They are being pressed toward authenticity because everything else has lost its appeal. This is not punishment. This is mercy disguised as disruption. For you, the reversal feels quieter but deeper. You are no longer bracing. You are no longer scanning for signs. You are no longer rehearsing explanations. Something inside you has settled, not because all answers have arrived, but because you no longer need them to feel whole. What was meant to exhaust you has ended up refining you. You may see outcomes change suddenly. People reposition themselves without prompting. Conversations resolve without confrontation. Opportunities appear where stagnation once lived. These are not coincidences. They are course corrections that were delayed until alignment could be preserved. I did not remove the danger prematurely because it would have returned in another form. I allowed it to reveal itself fully so it could be dismantled completely. Partial justice creates recurring cycles. Full justice creates closure. And now, the cycle is breaking. The one who interfered has lost access, not through argument, but through irrelevance. Their influence no longer carries weight. Their voice no longer shapes decisions. They may not even understand when it happened, only that something shifted and they are no longer central. This is the quiet power of divine correction. You are stepping into a season where you do not have to defend your peace. It is defended for you. My child, I want you to recognize this moment, not with celebration, but with gratitude. Gratitude for endurance. Gratitude for protection you could not see. Gratitude for endings that did not look like endings at first. The reversal does not mean everything resets to how it was. It means everything realigns to how it was always meant to be. Some things will not return. Some dynamics will not be restored. And that is not loss. That is precision. You are no longer available for confusion disguised as connection. You are no longer open to influence that requires you to shrink. You are no longer waiting to be chosen by someone who must first choose truth. And because of this, blessing is now permitted to flow without obstruction. You may feel cautious joy rising. Allow it. You may feel relief mixed with disbelief. Let it pass. You may feel strength where there was once only patience. That is growth revealing itself. This reversal did not come because you demanded it. It came because you stayed aligned long enough for justice to mature. You did not interrupt the process. You trusted it. And now, what was meant to end you is ended instead. Rest in this turning. The final movement is not about survival anymore. It is about destiny stepping forward to meet you. My child, you are still here, and now you know why. Survival was never the finish line. And with the proof that you were meant to arrive at this moment with your heart intact and your spirit awake. You were chosen not because you were flawless, but because you were faithful underweight. Because you carried love without demanding control. Because you endured confusion without surrendering truth. Many could not have stayed soft where you did. Many would have hardened, retaliated, or disappeared. You stayed, and staying shaped destiny. This is the blessing that follows endurance. What realigns now does not return you to the past. It meets you in the future. The version of you that stands here is stronger, clearer, and no longer willing to abandon themselves for connection. That is not loss. That is ascension. You do not need to become smaller to be loved. You do not need to be quieter to be chosen. You do not need to wait to be worthy. You already are. Your soulmate's awakening, whether it leads them back to you or forward on their own path, is no longer your burden to carry. You were never meant to save them. You were meant to be a mirror that invited truth. That invitation has been delivered. What they do with it is theirs. And you, my child, are free. Free from proving. Free from explaining. Free from carrying confusion that never belonged to you. Free to receive without fear that it will be taken. Free to love without losing yourself. Free to rest without guilt. This is what being chosen looks like. It does not always feel dramatic. Sometimes it feels like quiet relief. Sometimes it feels like tears you cannot explain. Sometimes it feels like peace arriving before answers. That is how you know it is real. What is divine settles instead of agitates. You may notice that doors open now with less effort. That conversations feel cleaner. That your intuition speaks louder and is easier to trust. These are signs of alignment restored. Your path is no longer obstructed by lessons that have already been learned. I am not asking you to rush ahead. I am asking you to walk forward without fear. What is meant for you will not require you to betray yourself. What is aligned with you will meet you in truth, not confusion. What is destined will recognize you without persuasion. You are still here because your story was never about barely making it through. It was about becoming someone who could carry blessing without shrinking under its weight. It was about surviving the fire without losing tenderness. It was about learning discernment without losing compassion. And you did. If you feel this truth settling deep within you, let it be acknowledged. Type in the comments, I receive alignment, not as performance, but as permission. Let it be a quiet yes between you and me. And if this message has walked with you through darkness, share it with someone who needs reassurance that staying meant something. Let this space continue to be a gathering place for those who are awakening gently. My child, the chapter of survival is closing, not with a slam, but with gratitude. Ahead is not perfection. Ahead is peace. Ahead is clarity. Ahead is connection that does not want you to reach you. You are still here because you are needed, because you are ready, because you are trusted with what comes next. Walk forward now. I am with you.